Howdy and welcome back to the Ineligibles podcast. My name is Will Stone, and no Chase Caldwell this week, but I'm joined by a very special guest, former A&M defensive lineman, works for or does some work for Good Bull Hunting and Dave Campbell's, Mr. Jay Arnold. Jay, thank you for being with me today.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, I mean it's talking season, right? So the more
Oh
talking I
yeah,
do, the more I feel like I'm reliving the glory days.
yeah. It's a little different from back in the day. I guess talking season is all we can do now. We can't get out there on the field. I never could. You could, back in the day, but yeah, it was kind of a last minute deal. We had Robert that was going to be on today. Chase is in Europe right now, probably gallivanting around Amsterdam as we speak. But Jay was kind enough to step in last minute and be the first guy off the bench.
Yeah, I feel like the last second, late notice UFC replacement. I made weight. I'm getting the money. Maybe I had to get a little bit of a catch weight in, but I made
Yeah,
it, and that's what counts.
yeah. Well, I feel like there's a lot of things that you've been involved in. So I guess just to start out, I guess give the folks at home a little bit of background and all the stuff that you've been a part of here lately.
Yeah, staying busy or trying to at least. I think that's better than the alternative. The new bill paying job of Pocket Talk Fest, where we're putting on the Sports World's Fair in Houston in 2024. That's my full time gig now. So going to be doing a lot of sports content with them, including driving from Houston, Texas to Richmond, Virginia. Next weekend for the NASCAR race, doing
Well,
a
that's
little bit of
fun.
content out there. Yeah, that's going to be a heck of a drive.
Yeah.
Obviously, like you mentioned, the Dave Campbell's. I have my podcast with Mike Craven at Dave Campbell's. It's Aggie War Pod, part of the Republic of Football Network.
Yeah.
And then I also have my Greater College Football podcast, which is by greater I mean focusing on the entire world of college football as
Right.
opposed to A&M. With my buddy Jake, the Get Back Coach, presented by Apollo Media. So that's it's a lot. It's a lot going on, but
Yeah.
trying to stay busy and put in the work as much as I can. So
Yeah.
it's a lot to keep up with. I can't even keep track of it half the time, but I appreciate all the support that everybody out there in the internet gives me, and
Yeah.
gives me opportunities to join shows like the Ineligibles and talk
That's right.
talk some more Aggie football.
Yeah. Absolutely. That's awesome. Well, I guess we'll start out a little bit with some SEC Media Days talk. Uh, I think A&M went on Monday, which was the first day of Media Days, and I'm not sure they've ever gone on the first day. I feel like they're always either the last day or second to last, and it was kind of nice to just get our stuff out of the way, and then just be able to sit back and watch the rest of the week. But I haven't seen too much from the other coaches. I saw Kiffin today was kind of doing some complaining about NIL and the rich programs, are at an advantage now, as if they weren't before. But that's his prerogative. But as far as A&M goes, I feel like it was, you know, it wasn't bad. It was kind of the same old stuff about Jimbo and Petrino, which was, it's kind of I don't know if annoying is the right word, but I think it is talking season, but I think we're all kind of ready for that to be over with, and for the for the games to start getting played, and we don't have to hear about is this happening or is that happening, and we can just see for ourselves who's calling the plays. But it sounds like even if he doesn't come out and say word for word Petrino is calling our plays, I think you're going to see Petrino be the play caller on Saturdays.
Yeah, I feel pretty confident, and you don't bring in a guy like Petrino and not have him call plays. Uh, Obviously, I mean, we'll see. There should be some changes in some of the stuff. I think we'll see a little bit more pre-snap motion.
Yeah.
Mixing in some sets and shifting, just to add a little bit more candy than maybe we're used to with Jimbo's offenses. But it'll be fun. Again, talking season. SEC Media Days is just it's a whole lot of nothing. I think it's a whole lot of coach speak for the most part.
Right.
And I mean, Jimbo's been saying the same thing. He's saying, not coming out right and saying that Bobby Petrino is calling the plays. And I mean, I guess it gives some people something to talk about, but it's been just kind of the theme this season. And
Yeah.
I'm like you. I'm ready for fall camp to come around and then get out on the field so we can actually get some games in.
Yeah, absolutely. As far as Jimbo goes, he had the traditional kind of speech at media days, and then he was with Feinbaum right after, and that was a little bit more clarifying, on kind of that relationship and how him and Petrino have worked together. Spoke very glowingly of Petrino. Says he's been a fantastic addition to the staff, and they're really excited about the team they got this year. But I thought it was interesting that Anais was talking, and he was saying that when Petrino got hired and Jimbo introduced him, he was like, "Hey, here's your new coordinator by Petrino," and then Jimbo just left the room and let him kind of take over and go from there. So um, it's TBD. I know everyone. I listen to a lot of national shows, and they're all about, well, if they can get along, then this may work out. But I feel like they will. But still it's still TBD, and we'll have to wait and see. But speaking of fall camp and the A&M football team, we always do on the Ineligibles. We'll do a positional preview kind of series every summer as we lead up to fall camp. We've in the past we've kind of gone quarterbacks and then skill guys and kind of on down from there. But we've got Jay Arnold on, so we kind of got to start with the trenches. I mean, that's also it's a trenches league, and it's the most important positions on the field. So you just did a piece on Good Bull Hunting, previewing the defensive line a little bit. I guess what's your take on what is a very talented bunch, but didn't quite perform up to the standards last year?
Yeah, and here's the thing about last year. I think a lot of people were so excited about the talent that was brought in that they were ignoring the fact that A&M was losing all of their starters.
Right.
Right? It's anytime you're in a conference like the SEC, cohesiveness and continuity are very important. And A&M didn't have that last year. The talent was evident, and obviously you look at the results, giving up over 200 yards a game, only having I think 19 sacks as a team on the year. That's I think the inexperience showing. But when I go back and watch the tape, A&M's not getting blown off the ball up front. So there are things that you can fix, right? If your team's just getting blown off the ball, that's not fixable. I think with the amount of talent that A&M has, and now they're coupled that with experience, they seem to get better as the season went on. I think we're going to see a very, very good unit up front with the mix of talent and depth.
Yeah, I know last year when we did this position preview. Of course, we were super excited, and like all the young guys that came in, like all the 5 stars from that number one class. But when we talked about it, we didn't expect any of those guys to start or really even play a ton. You had McKinley Jackson, you had Albert Regis, Isaiah Rakes, kind of there in the middle, Shamar Turner as well. And then Fadil Diggs and Tamisha Adelier had kind of, cemented themselves as starters at end. And you're like, well, those guys are going to get the bulk of the reps with these young guys kind of, I guess rotating in as they're needed. But that wasn't really the case at all. McKinley missed the first, I think, 5 games of the season. Was fantastic when he came back, but he missed those first 5. Fadil Diggs missed the last maybe 3 or 4 games. I think Tamisha played in maybe 1 or 2 games at the beginning, and then not again for the rest of the year. And you had to count on these young guys: Walter Nolan, Shamar Stewart, LT Overton. LT Overton was 17 years old and had to play 300 plus snaps in the SEC last year, and that's a tough deal. But no, I think we should have been maybe a little more tempered last year because that 2021 group was just so good.
Yeah.
I mean,
so good and so experienced.
Yeah, I mean, I think Peavy came back for a bonus year. I know Clemens did. And yeah, they're a bunch of grown men, and they put together a great unit. But most of those guys are in the NFL now, and it was just a little bit younger last year.
Yeah, and it's just tough whenever you don't have the one-on-one game experience, right? the top of the top of the defensive line versus the top of the offensive line. It's just it's a different feel out there, and those guys had to get used to it. But by the same token, they were thrown right into the fire, and you're going to sink or swim at that point. And I think that the value of all the experience these guys got is just going to make them so much better. And now you get guys like Fadil Diggs back, like McKinley Jackson back healthy, and you mix in guys like Nolan with more experience, Shamar Stewart, like you mentioned. Shamar Turner's also got a little more experience than he had last year. LT Overton. I mean, there's so many names, and I mean, we didn't even talk about like Malik Silla is one of the guys that I'm really high on as a prospect just because of the length and agility that he brings to the defensive end position. I think he's going to be a real problem for opposing offensive lines rushing the passer if he puts it all together this year. I mean, it's and then we get into like the new one of the top rated recruits from the last class in DJ Hicks.
Right.
So you think about just the sheer amount of talent that A&M has on the defensive line and the fact that they have experience now. And it's hard not to envision this group taking a massive step forward.
Yeah. So, as someone who played and played here and played this kind of, like this position, is it reasonable that the biggest leap that a player will make is from their freshman year to their sophomore year?
I think that's usually accurate. You get another full season under your belt in the weight room too. So your body's going to mature some. And that's not to say that some guys may not take leaps later in their careers, but I mean, the freshman to sophomore year is a big gap. I mean, you're adjusting to the speed of the game, you're adjusting to the schedule, you're adjusting to so many things when you first come into a college football program. As a freshman, a lot of times you're just trying not to get swept away by all of the different factors that are coming into your life now that you didn't have when you were a high school football player.
Right.
So now they have a year under their belt and they kind of know what it's about. They've gone through a season. You expect to take a leap because of that life experience, but also because of the time that you've had to improve both in the weight room and in the film room.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a great point. I feel like I'd have to go back and look, but I don't know if any of those freshman defensive linemen were in here for the spring last year. And there may have been one or two.
I think a couple of them were, but
Yeah.
again, spring is one thing. Going through the actual rigors of an SEC season is a whole nother animal.
Yeah. Yeah. No doubt about it. And you talked at the beginning about the production and like some of those numbers, like the run defense and the sacks. It wasn't quite up to the level that we expected. But I went back and I watched the LSU game for like the 100th time the other day, and you see those young guys really making plays.
Yeah.
I mean, like a guy like Malik Silla, he didn't play much last year. He got in that game, and he showed that explosive ability and some of that power. And like Walter Nolan was flashing and making plays. And I think I'm not sure if anybody. I mean, like outside of the transfers, the guys that played the most are all back. And they're headlined by a guy that I think is probably the best player on the team, at least for this season, and that's McKinley Jackson. I guess talk a little bit about what you see in McKinley Jackson's game.
Well, first of all, McKinley Jackson is a vital leader in that locker room with the experience that he has. He's kind of the transitional piece from that incredible group with DeMarvin Leal and Jaden Peavy and Michael Clemens to this new group and the youth. And so it's a lot of pressure on him to kind of lead by example. But you look at the strength that he possesses up front. I mean, he is just a tough guy to move. It's in the run game, especially, he made an instant impact whenever he got back on the field. He's able to rush the passer as well, but his strength is always going to be the run game just because of how strong he is. He's able to eat up double teams. I mean, you look at a guy like that and it's something that you have to prepare for as an offense when someone is that good at what they do. Right. Like,
Yeah.
And if, he's able to eat up double teams in the run game, That's going to free up guys like Walter Nolan to make plays. That's going to
Right.
free up your defensive ends. And most importantly, it's going to give the linebackers a chance to read and react. I think that was part of the problem that A&M had last year is at the linebacker position. It's hard to read and react when, you have inexperienced guys who may not be fitting correctly,
Yeah.
right? Like that's one thing that I think was an issue as opposed to getting blown off the ball. Like some of the young cats are still learning the defensive playbook and it may not be fitting correctly. And it's hard for
Yeah.
linebackers to scrape over the top when they're not sure and they're kind of guessing where their defensive lineman's going to be.
So I think that is a good point right there. I think that's a good reason to expect some improvement. On top of just the physical improvements is guys being in the wrong gaps and not knowing, like being so new and not really knowing, like the gap they're supposed to be in and things like that.
Yeah, and it was a new defense coordinator last year too. So there's going to be
Oh
some
yeah.
differences in scheme and terminology that the guys had to adjust to. And I don't know the intricacies of either Mike Elko's playbook or DJ Durkin's playbook, so I can't speak to what kind of differences in learning that might have been. But that's gonna create a little bit of a lack of continuity as well. So
Yeah.
every little piece that's kind of added to that equation, and not having consistency there is just another factor that can limit what a team's able to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Staying on the interior, a guy like Walter Nolan. So you played, back in as part of the 2013 sign class. So like you were still on the team when Miles Garrett came along. Obviously, Walter, different type of player, different body type as Miles Garrett, but was a number 2 rated player in his class and just super freaky ability. Um, it feels like this is going to be a breakout year for him.
Yeah, up front in the defensive line in the SEC, it's hard to make an impact your freshman year. I think Walter Nolan still did. It took him a little while to adjust, but especially towards the end of the season, he was making plays. The sophomore year is where you see the big leap, and obviously, you compared him to Miles Garrett in that they're just freak athletes, and when those types of guys walk on the field, they're going to be special. Walter Nolan feels like that kind of player. Miles Garrett was immediately that kind of player. And obviously very different positions. Walter Nolan on the inside and Miles was on the outside. But when you have that kind of a special athlete, it's the same thing I'm talking about with McKinley Jackson with the strength to eat up double teams. A guy like Nolan, if he lives up to his potential, is going to attract so much attention from opposing offenses. They're going to have to account for wherever he is on the field.
Yeah.
And when that happens, I mean, that's when you see sacks occur from inside. Like that's a quarterback's worst nightmare. They don't want the interior defensive lineman to be able to rush the passer because the path to the quarterback is that much quicker, right? And again, Nolan having that athleticism, having that strength, having all of the intangibles that you would hope for, he's going to be a real problem for
Yeah.
offenses if he puts it together this year. And it certainly feels like it's going to be that kind of year for him.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I feel like when I watch him, the phrase that I use the most is he's just a handful. I mean, like he's got the freaky talent and ability and like the raw physical gifts, but I feel like he's got that motor too, where he's just constantly moving his feet, moving his hands, and trying to get by you. And with a guy like him playing next to a guy like McKinley, that's a pretty fearsome duo right there in the SEC.
Yeah, I look at those two together, and it's one of the best, if not the best, interior defensive line duos in the country. And if both those guys stay healthy, I think, especially with Nolan, I think just the fact that he's still young and is only likely to get better as
Yeah,
the season goes along. You talked about all the physical tools, but I mean, technically speaking, too, as he improves technically up front, that's just going to be another factor in how he can affect the game. And I mean, it's hard for me as a defensive lineman to not get excited
right.
about the abilities that a guy like Walter Nolan has. I mean,
Yeah,
he's one of those guys when I turn on the film that I get to sit back and enjoy it, and I have a lot of fun watching him
yeah.
go to work.
No, and he was one of my like like his high school tape was some of my favorite because he like back then he was like 320 and just like bowling over, these high school alignment and dominated every camp that he went to.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
yeah,
now the
it's
roster has him listed at like 285, and so
yeah,
now there's going to be an added element of quickness to his game,
right.
and that's kind of frightening to think about if you're an offensive lineman.
Yeah. So you've got two great guys on the front line there, and quite a bit of depth. So you got some bigger body types. Albert Regis, Isaiah Rakes, both in the 320 range, I believe. Maybe even a little bit bigger, but a guy like I've always been impressed with Albert Regis. I think he played like fullback and tight end in high school, and then he just kept on growing and kept that athleticism. Big guy, but can really move. But I guess talk about some of these other interior guys, Rakes Regis, or even a freshman that we didn't see last year in Brownlow Dindy.
Yeah, and Brenlo Dindy was banged up for a lot of the year, and he's a guy that I was also really high on coming out of high school, and I think he's got a lot of potential. But it's going to be hard to get on the field, right, with just so many weapons. I mean, ideally A&M rotates it enough, keeps legs fresh out there, but at the same time, you don't want to take the guys like Jackson or Nolan off too much. And sticking on the interior, I mean, you talked about Regis again. Keeping that athleticism while being a guy at like 320 pounds makes you really, really tough to move in the run game. And if you're quick enough, you can also affect the passer. I just, man, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but the sheer amount of depth and talent that A&M has, coupled with the fact that all those guys are experienced now, it's the sky's the limit for the unit. And
Yeah,
I'm still trying to dose myself with a healthy bit of skepticism, given the results from last season. And depth at linebacker could still be a problem in the run game. Make no
sure.
mistake about that. But when it comes to this defensive line, I mean, you got to expect quite a big leap forward from the unit, especially with McKinley Jackson back and having that senior leadership along the front.
Right, and I read your preview before this, and at the end, like you gave it a grade of a B plus, which sounds crazy. Like we're sitting here talking like we're so high on it, but it's a B plus. But I tend to agree. We're still kind of scoring from last season where we can't like we're just not ready to jump all the way back in yet, right?
Yeah, and like I said in the piece on Good Bull Hunting, I gave the defensive line a B plus, but I said that I'm expecting this group to improve to the point where
Right.
they finish at an A at the end of the season, well
Yeah.
within the A range. And I mean, another key to that is, and we've been focusing on the interior, but the pass rush has to get better too. 19 sacks as a team. Obviously, with Durkin, you're going to get some exotics, you're going to get some blitz packages mixed in, but as a defensive lineman, you want to see the guys up front get those sacks. And
Yeah.
I think Fadil Diggs flashed that ability a lot, but was banged up. Again, I'm really high on Scylla and what he can do, especially with his length at the position. LT Overton, again, he was a 17-year-old last year.
Yeah.
He's a really young cat. So when you talk about the physical aspects of the game, he probably still has quite a bit of growing to do. Right.
Yeah.
And another year in the program and he's stepping up. And I mean, I think you're going to see Shamar Turner out at the strong side defensive end position, or again, I'm not sure exactly what the terminology that Durkin's going to use, but he's going to be out on the edge as well. And he may not be as much of a pure pass rusher. He may be more of a set the edge against the run type of guy, but then you
Yeah.
can bring in these packages or you can, get your best pass rushers on the field in certain situations by stopping the run. So all these guys are going to play vital roles, but again, it's waiting to see how this defensive line unit maximizes their talent.
Yeah.
And with the depth, they should be able to rotate pretty often.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, like to go along with the pass rush, I feel like the only knock on this group, at least from fans, and it's probably warranted, is that lack of pass rush. Like we have so many resources, and so many great talents on the defensive line, but we haven't had, like none of these guys have been a Von Miller, Miles Garrett impact yet. But I think a guy like Silla has that that type of a pass rush to his game. Like he's got those skills.
And to be fair, there aren't a lot of Von Millers and Miles Garrett's in the world.
Yes, absolutely. That can be overstated. And then a guy like Overton, he was trending towards more of a strong side end, and played at like 270 plus. I've heard he's down to 255, and trying to be more of a speed and more of a pass
Yeah,
rusher.
and again, with a defensive end that's only 17 years old, you don't know how those bodies are going to change.
Yeah,
He may get a lot quicker, that way he gets off, and uh, he may become a real problem out there at end. I mean,
yeah,
it's that's the questions of youth, right?
yeah,
Like you don't always know how these guys are going to develop, but it sure seems like it's trending towards a lot of ability to make havoc in the backfield for this
yeah.
defensive line.
Absolutely, and like you talked about Fadil Diggs, he's a guy I was really high on last year. Like from what I've heard from him as one of those locker room guys and one of those leaders, he was really hitting his stride down the stretch before he got hurt. Um, Very glad to have him back. Shamar Turner's kind of bounced back and forth between inside outside. I thought he looked fantastic at end in the spring game. I know it's just a spring game, but like maybe the back and forth wasn't, uh, the best thing. Maybe he's been focusing just on end, and maybe that was a good thing for him. And I'm not sure. Like I don't know all the background, but I think the signs that were there in the spring were very encouraging.
Yeah, and I mean, again, you never know exactly how what kind of schemes we're going to see, from Durkin. There was a lot of 3-man fronts last year.
Yeah,
Personally, like with the amount of talent on the defensive line, I'd like to see more 4-man fronts, just because I think you're maximizing what is the deepest position on the field for the Aggies defensively, and the secondary is pretty talented as well too. But I think you want to have 4 of those guys that are extremely talented up front, and I mean we'll see how it shakes out, but
yeah.
um, just really excited about this unit's potential going into 2023.
Yeah, and the thought that I keep having is if there's reasons that we've lined out here that like why there should be improvement, and you know it shouldn't just be like a little bit of improvement. I think with the high level ability these guys possess, it may not be as dominant as what you saw at Clemson those couple years or at Georgia the past few years, but it shouldn't be far from that. Like it should be like one of those dominant defensive lines in the country.
Yeah, I mean, I do think the potential is there to have like that Clemson team that you mentioned with Cleveland Farrell and Dexter Lawrence and those guys that were really talented, and Georgia with guys like uh I mean, slipping my mind right now, Jalen Carter and
Yeah,
all the talent they had up front there. But
Jordan Davis,
yeah, I mean, it's
huge person.
it's hard to it's hard to compare anybody to those types of guys.
Yeah,
But I do think the potential for A&M to be truly special this year and next year is
yeah,
there.
yeah. Well, before we switch over to O line, the last guy I wanted to mention was Shamar Stewart. There's so many of them; it's hard
Yeah.
to make sure we hit on them all. But he was one of those 5-star kids, defensive end, really physically gifted. I saw a picture of him from they do the team photo shoots before the season. He may get some time inside. Like
Yeah.
that is a large man, he's just another piece to this plethora of talent.
Yeah, it's an embarrassment of riches up front, and I don't disagree with you that I think we may see Shamar Stewart shift inside a little bit, uh, or he could be that strong side end position as well.
Right.
That kind of sets the edge and is more of a threat against the run than the pass. But it's again, it's an embarrassment of riches. The
Yeah.
fact that we're questioning, how we're going to maximize the use of everybody on the field it's a good problem to have.
Yes. Yes. 100%. A position where there may not be quite the embarrassment of riches and has kind of been maligned is the offensive line for A&M. Back when I first got to A&M back in 2011, we had 3 first round draft picks on that line. Pat Lewis was an incredible center. Jarvis Harrison was a great guard, and when in Johnny's Heisman year, that offensive line was the unsung hero of that year. Well, it's a they're acknowledged by A&M fans, but I don't know if the casual college football fan realizes how good that line was. Um, since then, the 2020 line was outstanding. Finalists for the Joe Moore Award, 4 seniors on that O line, and 4 seniors and an All-American and first-round draft pick, Kenyon Green. His loss was felt last year, but coming into last season, when we did this position last year, I was pretty high on the group. I thought guys like Bryce Foster and Reuben Fothery kind of found their footing close to the end of their freshman years. You had Leighton Robinson back, and then and Trey Zune's a guy I've been high on for a long time. But then the injury bug kind of hit. It feels like outside of Reuben, the rest of those guys weren't very healthy. Having to move around and and bring in Wyckoff and then bring in a different guard and things like that. But you're feeling on the offensive line right now.
Yeah, I mean, the offensive line has to be better in 2023. Again, like you said, the injury bug bit pretty hard. Bryce Foster missed a lot of time. I mean, he comes into the season and he's dealing with an illness in camp that limits his ability to play. And then, I mean, that probably leads to the injury, right? Like when you're sick and unable to really work out and dealing with that, it's just hard.
Yeah.
And I'm not blaming the injuries on anybody in particular. I mean, it's a very physical sport and things happen. I think you look at like Leighton Robinson back, obviously should be improvement or should be consistency there. Reuben Fothery back, I think at times he reached a little bit and that was a little bit of a problem for him. Just something that he's going to have to address in 2023. And look, this unit knows they have to be better.
Right.
And last year, obviously, again, we talked about continuity on the defensive line. Continuity on the offensive line was an issue as well. You have a new offensive line coach come in. Josh Henson leaves, Steve Adazio's in, and it's an adjustment. Excuse me. And it can be tough. I don't know the differences in coaching styles between those two, but that's an adjustment. And the left side of the offensive line had a lot of turnover. With Zune being hurt a little bit and some of the guys at guard being hurt. But
yeah,
you look at some of the young guys that stepped in and filled the gaps when some of the guys went down. Cam Dewberry, I think, is a really, really exciting guy on the interior offensive line. And Mark Naboo, I thought was pretty solid when he stepped in as well. So there are things to be excited about, but I'm a little bit less high on this group, and that's not to condemn the offensive line by any means. I just think the defensive line with their talent and depth is a little bit more likely to take a leap forward than this offensive line is. But I do think we'll see the offensive line improve.
Right. And I think improvement is all we really want to see. I think it's as much as we can sit here and talk about play calling and talk about Connor Wigman. Last season, I pulled this a while back, but among Power 5 teams, A&M was pretty much tied for dead last in pressure rate allowed, with teams like Nebraska and Virginia and Boston College with like a 41% pressure rate allowed. It doesn't matter what offense you're running if you're letting the defensive line and pass rush get to your quarterback that often. So that's something that definitely needs to be improved upon. But I mean, I think it was an article from Bill Connolly at ESPN that we had 10 different guys on the O-line start last year, and that's just a recipe for disaster. I mean, especially on the offensive line. Like defensive line, you can I feel like the continuity may not be as big of a factor, but on the O-line, like you really need to have those same 5 guys like in every game.
Yeah, I think offensive line is more rhythmic in its nature and how that can impact the game. Like you said, continuity is much more important on the offensive line, and especially like when Bryce Foster is out. I mean, your center is the quarterback of your offense, your offensive line, I should say. And when you have a guy that's a cerebral aspect of that unit, it's tough. It's tough to adjust, and not to knock Matthew Wyckoff coming in, but having familiarity with the guys next to you in offensive line play, I think is much more important than defensive line, because defense is a lot more reactive to what you see in front of you,
Yeah.
right? Offensive line, and there is some reactivity to there, but it's a lot more about executing what is in the game plan. It's a lot more about getting in sync with the guys next to you than defensive line play is. And like you said, I mean, 10 different starters on the offensive line, it's a recipe for disaster. But if you can get 5 offensive line starters and keep them healthy and establish, that synchronicity that's so important to offensive line play, uh, that's when you start really seeing gains on the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah. Like I think if you replayed last season and the only change you made was just all 5 offensive linemen started every game, it probably goes a little bit differently. Even if they even if they don't make these vast improvements, uh, which we're hoping that they do, like just the continuity and playing week in and week out together and not having to shuffle around, that alone should be a reason for improvement.
Yeah, and it's a lot easier when you just kind of focus in on your job and you're not shifting around.
Yeah,
It can make all the difference in the world. And again, the talent's there. Like guys like Ruben Fathery and Bryce Foster and Layden Robinson are all immensely talented. It may not be to the level of that like 2012 offensive line, which again, that the really special group that they had there. But
yeah,
a lot of the reason they were so successful is those guys were so used to playing with each other.
yeah,
So we'll see if A&M is able to get a little bit luckier in that regard this year.
for sure. And in the spring, we especially in the spring game, we didn't get to see Bryce. He's still coming back from that ACL. Sounds like he's going to be just fine coming into fall camp. I think Ruben played, pretty much the whole spring, just missed the game. I mean, you see guys get held out for the spring game for any kind of minor injury. But there's a guy you mentioned a few minutes ago that I was really impressed with. That's Mark Naboo. Um, I'm not sure where he would play. I'm sorry, I'm not sure where he would start this year, but he's really dang good. I mean, they
Yeah.
had him playing all 5 spots from left tackle to right tackle and everything in between. Um,
Yeah, and it's at the guard position too, a guy that we didn't touch on, but that saw some action last year and was also hurt. In Jordan Moko. I mean, it's not the degree of depth that the defensive line has, but there's a little more depth this year and experience as well. So that when guys do go down, and I'd love to say that everyone's going to stay healthy, but it's the SEC and it's a really physical game. So
yeah,
if you do manage to keep your whole roster healthy, I mean, I don't know what kind of devil magic you're working, but it's just not likely to happen.
yeah,
But yeah, I think at points during the season you're going to see guys like Naboo step up, and obviously with uh, Layden Robinson probably leaving. I mean, I think somebody's going to be looking to fill that gap too at season's end, and guys like Naboo and Dewberry are I think ready now after kind of getting thrown into
yeah.
the fire in the same way a lot of those guys on the defensive line did. So it's definitely a youth movement for A&M at some points, but the thing about this offensive line that I like is they also have a healthy dose of experience with that right side of the offensive line and Bryce Foster at center.
Yeah, yeah. I think Bryce is really the key there. Like you saw, we struggled a little bit when he was out at the beginning last year. He comes back, things stabilize a little bit, and then he goes out against Alabama. But yeah, I think he's key. And Layden and Ruben have played so much. I was really impressed with Cam Dewberry, getting tossed in as a true freshman last year. He's also a guy, at least from what I see on Twitter and hear from other people, is he's kind of a leader, and he's part of that 22 class. Like he's one of the guys that's still here and has his head screwed on straight, and he's a big part of the team and a big leader in the offensive line room. But I think he's set for a pretty big year there at left guard. At left tackle, I feel like Trey Zune is like he gets a lot of blame from some of our fans, but it's not a thing of his physical abilities. I don't think. I'm sure you probably saw this, but in the week of the first game last year, his mom posted on TextZags that he had dislocated his kneecap in practice that week. I've never had that kind of injury. I've never even heard of that kind of injury, but it sounds pretty painful. And to kind of come back and play through that,
It's not
um,
ideal.
yeah, that's one thing you don't want to be dislocated is your kneecap.
Yeah, and I mean, again, a lot of those guys are banged up last year, so I think we take every bit of performance with a grain of salt. And left tackle is not an easy position to step in for your first time starting. Obviously, I think we had high expectations for him, and maybe he didn't meet those, but I do think there's room for improvement. I think he has the physical tools to improve
Yeah,
in the 2023 season, and he's going to be a key aspect of giving Connor Wegman the confidence that he needs at the quarterback position, and to play with the confidence and the swagger that he did at the end of the season in that LSU game. The offensive line has to give him the confidence to be able to do that.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And it goes back to what we talked about with the D line. That pressure from the interior, it's just a killer. I mean, that's why guys like Aaron Donald make so much money, is because it's so rare to find a guy like that, and that what he can do is just so disruptive to the offense and throws their whole thing out of whack.
Yeah, and for A&M, the interior should be the strength of this unit, I would think. I think tackle play is going to need a lot of improvement. Uh, I have a little more faith in the interior to improve than I do in the outside guys, but again, the physical tools are there. So if they do step up, this offense could be special as well.
Yeah. There's one thing I want to pick your brain on as it relates to the scheme of the O line a little bit. There's one thing I noticed in the spring game is there were a lot more gap scheme kind of runs. And for a defensive lineman, is that a little more trickier to play against when you've got guys kind of blocking down or pulling around on you?
It can be. I mean, the thing about it is, like I was saying, you have to react as a defensive lineman. A lot of it is reacting to what you see in front of you, and you do want to kind of key in on some tells pre-snap. Like you're going to see if a guy's light in a stance, or if the split is a little bit closer, that could be setting up a double team. I mean, there's little things that you pick up on that can
Yeah.
be tricky. Gap scheme versus more of a zone scheme. It just kind of depends on what you're seeing out of the offensive line. And, this could be something where they're trying to ease up things for the offensive line and make it a little simpler. As a defensive lineman, I just personally hated anytime I had to deal with like a zone read, especially on the end. But, I mean, with gap schemes, I mean, defensive line, you're going to have a gap responsibility anyway. And
Yeah.
you have some things that you can, like I mentioned, key in on to kind of let you know if you are going to have to switch off and deal with somebody blocking down, or,
Yeah.
you know, pulling. I mean, you learn pretty quick, especially at the college level, that if all of a sudden there's free air in front of you, you don't want to run into that.
Yeah.
You don't want to run into that, because that's when you get just kind of blindsided by a pulling guard, and it is not a fun feeling.
Yeah. Yeah. If it seems like it's too easy, there's probably a freight train coming from on the opposite side of the line.
Yeah,
But
and it does not feel good to get blindsided by a guard. I can assure you of that.
yeah. Well, yeah. I think I'm with you on the interior. Those guys do have so much experience and talent now. Yeah, I think this I think we'll talk about the skill guys a little bit next week, but um, you hate to lose a guy like A Chain, but with this O line being shored up and Petrino coming in, I feel like this run game could be really really stout.
Yeah, and the thing about A-Chain last year too was I think he covered up some of the flaws on the run game for the A&M offensive line. Now I think it's the offensive line's turn to give the running backs confidence. And there's a lot of talent in the backfield. I think we'll see how they want to approach it. I think it's going to be more of a committee approach than we've seen the last few years. Obviously, with A-Chain and then with Spiller before him, where Spiller got a lot of the carries. I think you're going to see a little bit more rotation in that backfield. But with the offensive line having more experience, I think there will be bigger gaps for the running backs to go through. So they should theoretically be able to pick up the gap that A-Chain left by nature of the offensive line improving.
Yeah. That's definitely the hope. And,
Yeah. Now, obviously, you can't replace the speed of a guy like A-Chain.
oh, yeah, of course.
But, there's going to be a real opportunity for one of the guys to step up. And I mean, I like Le'Veon Moss a lot. I think that he's a cat that has a little bit of everything to him. And I think that's kind of what you want in the modern game out of a running back. But we'll see. I mean, you also got to look at a guy like Reuben Owens coming in as a freshman, and seeing what he's able to bring to the table, because he's another guy that I think that can do it all.
Absolutely.
And one of the it's maybe underrated in the casual football fan, but like guys like us, we always talk about pass protection from the running back position, and we'll see what these backs are able to do in that aspect of the game as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've got to mention my guy, Amari Daniels. Every time I've seen him, like I went to the open practice a couple years ago, and like he was already like starting to light it up, and has been behind A-Chain, and I think you got a real three-headed monster there.
Yeah.
But that's the hope. Is like as much hope as we have for the D line. B+ right now could be an A as we get into the year. Could be an A+ as we get into the year. I think if the line is just a solid B, this could be a fantastic year for A&M.
Yeah, on the offensive side of the ball for sure. And then, I mean, especially when you throw in those tight ends to the mix. In the trenches as well. I mean, one of the most talented tight end rooms in the country, in my opinion, with Max Wright coming back as a leader, a voice in that locker room, and then also having Donovan Green with the talent he has, and Jake Johnson with the talent he has, and I mean there's a lot of potential. I mean, coaches always told me like potential means you just haven't done anything yet, but the ability to do something is there, and so that's
right.
I think that's why we're all just itching for the season to get started.
Yep, no doubt about it. Well, I think before we get out of here, there was another topic I wanted to cover, and that is the first new Turnpike album since 2017, I believe. So rate your excitement level for football, and then your excitement level for a new Turnpike album.
It's got to be a 10 for both. I mean, new Turnpike album. I one of my favorite bands of all time. Dude, I saw them at Green Hall. I think my freshman year or my sophomore year of college. I can't remember which one. It was either 2013 or 2014, and that was one of the best concerts I've ever been to in my life. And I've just been a huge fan of them since then. I mean, Evan Felker's a fantastic songwriter, and he's gone through quite a bit. And I hate to be I don't want to be excited about it, but the material that he has to write about, I mean, you can't help be a little bit excited about what this album could be like. And then Aggie football is also pretty exciting for me coming up with the potential for greatness. So,
and we've also been through a lot. So
yeah, amen. So we'll see what happens with that, and I'm very, very much looking forward to both. And if the Aggie football season goes haywire, at least I'll have a new Turnpike album to drown my sorrows with.
There you go. Yeah, I'm with you on that material. It could be some really solid stuff. I was talking to my wife about this. We're both big Turnpike fans, but you might see a true love song from Turnpike on this album. After some of the stuff that he went through, and then and then kind of getting back in a good place there. But it's been so long. He's probably got more songs written that would fit on this album. So like he had to probably pick the best ones.
Yeah.
So I hope that's a good sign for the album. But no, I'm thrilled about that, and thrilled about football season. we have media days this week. I think today was the last day. Um, uh, NFL practices start next week. College the week after. It's really starting to ramp up here. I'm pumped up about it.
Yeah, just counting down the days.
Well, Jay, I really do appreciate you coming on here on the last minute. Chase Caldwell's going to be bummed that he wasn't on here for your first appearance on the show. I know you guys go way back to the football days back in the day.
Old cheese for the guys that know.
Oh, cheese. But he's off gallivanting in Europe, so we'll have to get him back on when he's back in the States. But thank you so much, and I'm sure we'll see you back on the show. I think before too long, and definitely during football season. But we certainly appreciate it.
Yeah, man. I appreciate being the last minute sub and having the opportunity to come on, and always fun to talk the trenches.
All right. Well, he's Jay Arnold. I'm Will Stone. This is the Ineligibles podcast, and we'll be back with you next week.